So we're at our final agenda item, and it's a panel discussion focused on AI and life sciences, biotechnology. The panel will be led by Delphine Zurkiya. Delphine is a senior partner with McKinsey. She helps medtech, life science, health tech, and technology companies define, accelerate, and operationalize their growth, digital and AI transformations. And she has three esteemed panelists. We have, okay, there he is. Derrick Fournier, who's the Vice President, Digital Innovation for Global Product Development and Supply Chain at Bristol Myers Squibb. Julie Sheffield, the VP Software Engineering at DeepHealth. And Dr. Mike Hamill, who is the Chief Innovation Officer and co-founder at Abiologics. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you, Delphine.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be back on campus. I was here 25 years ago in what was called the AI lab at the time, and trying to develop AI for radiologists. And it's now finally working, as we'll hear from Julie, so it's great to be back. Well, let's get started. So maybe first I'll start with an easy question, which is to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your company. And since this is a panel about life sciences, we'll have a focus on patients. How does your company ultimately help patients? Thanks. Julie.
So DeepHealth is a wholly owned subsidiary of RadNet, which is one of the biggest outpatient radiology clinics in the world, in the country. So we have the privilege of getting a lot of patient impact from the get-go, which is nice. And I particularly work in the clinical AI division, which means that my team is building AI tools to aid radiologists in detecting neurodegenerative disease, and various screening programs for cancer. Breast, lung, prostate are the ones that are currently in clinical use right now, and we're processing millions of scans a year. So the patient impact has been very gratifying to see. We can really see the impact of additional cancers caught.
Great to hear. So chances are all of us will benefit at some point. Let's go to Derrick. What does BMS do?
Thank you. So BMS is Bristol Myers Squibb. We are a life sciences company. We make life-saving medicines to help patients. So we have a variety of different types of modalities. So we have drugs that are pill form, which some of you may be familiar with, Eliquis, which is a blood thinner. We have injectables, whether it's in the immunoscience space, or we do a lot in the oncology space. So we have, if you're on some of those medicines, you have cancer, and you may be on your last line of treatment. And then we have our third type of modality, which is cell therapy. And cell therapy takes cells from patients. We inject a virus, essentially, to reprogram some of those cells so that they can fight cancer. We're also introducing a new modality, which is, we made an acquisition last year, which is radiopharmaceuticals, which utilizes a key type of, essentially it takes an isotope, attaches it to a molecule that makes it so that it's very targeted precision for a specific type of tumor. So I work in the global product development and supply space, which is all about manufacturing and supply chain. How do we get product to patients? And get in the cell therapy side, it's like, how do you get it to them very rapidly before, because it's their last line of treatment. They, in some cases, they might pass away. So you want to get it to them very quickly.
Thank you. Mike, what does Flagship do?
Yes, so I represent
your
two
company more
companies
specifically,
today.
that's right.
Sure, so I am a co-founder at Abiologics, which is a company that Flagship founded. Flagship Pioneering is a venture creation firm that's about a 10-minute walk that way, where we build life science companies. So I'm an origination partner there, which means that I serially am going to be building companies at Flagship in the life sciences area. So at Abiologics, this is a preclinical company. It's 20 people. We just started a few years ago, and we're using AI and ML to build mirror image biologics, which I'll explain more as we get into what kind of AI and what we're doing at Abiologics, but it's something that wouldn't have been possible without the tools that have been built. And then at Flagship, we're constantly creating new companies, and AI has become central to our process. We have an entire team there now called Pioneering Intelligence, which helps us leverage AI in any way we can from the beginning of envisioning even the companies that we'd want to build. So really big part of both. And yeah.
Great. So let's learn a little bit about, we'll start with the what, and then we'll go to the how. But I'd love to learn a little bit about the type of AI that's really being deployed, so beyond the hype, we'll say, and where you are starting to see meaningful impact, whether it's for the patient and or the P&L. There's two types of AI we heard about today, two broad categories. One is embedded in solutions that are developed and sold to customers, and the second is to make a company more effective. So we'll start with the first one, which is embedding AI in the products that are being used by the customers directly. And Julie, I'd love to learn a little bit about the type of AI that you're using for these radiologists. And as we were preparing, I thought it was interesting that you told me there's certain areas where it's working better than others. So I was curious for you to share that with the audience.
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have models for different modalities, different kinds of scans, and different disease types. And in certain practices, it's screening population, you'll have 5 cases out of 1,000 will actually have something significant. So tuning the true to false positive rate is where you get you have to be very precise about it. So as I said, we have a parent company that is doing millions of scans a year, so we have the advantage of a lot of data, but there's limitations to the data in every different modality. So for breast cancer, we get the biopsy results back because that is part of the feedback loop to radiologists, is to know whether the biopsy was true or false, but it's not part of the general clinical practice to annotate the suspicious region. So we have lots of very good ground truth but weakly labeled data, whereas in prostate, it's part of the clinical process to outline, here's the suspicious region, but we never find out. The urologist just never bothers to tell the radiologist, oh yeah, this was aggressive cancer, or no, this turned out to be, slow growing or not, or even, the radiologist identified it as suspicious. That doesn't necessarily mean cancer. And so we have very good localized data, but not the final ground truth. So a lot of what we are doing is building out the data feedback loops. That's where the biggest value comes from. You can have the best, most cutting edge architecture for your model, but if the data is not there, you're not going to get the outcomes you want. So it's been great to be really integrated into clinical practice. It's not just RadNet, but RadNet's the one we have the most insight into from our patient feedback. And it's the one I'm most excited about is actually the lung cancer screening in the UK. So this is a relatively new process that the NHS has rolled out. They did a pilot program that we were privileged to be involved with, and then decided to roll it out across the nation. And there has been, over the course of the last year, a full stage earlier detection of lung cancer, going from 3.6-ish to 2.5, which is life and death difference, because the treatments at stage 2 are possible. The treatments at stage 3 and 4 are much harder. So that has been really exciting.
And we talked a lot about Gen AI, but just curious, are you at that point of using these more general models, or is it still very supervised, very, we'll say, traditional?
Sure. So for the vision detection and segmentation models, they're still, we're seeing the supervised models still considerably outperform the fine-tuned foundation models, but we are, of course, experimenting with it. On the radiology, speed up, efficiency gain, we are using LLMs to help them go from findings to the recommendations. So, as they're reading the scan, they're saying, I see this, I see that, and then at the end it's saying, all right, well, here is the impression of the radiologist, and that's what goes back. So, and internally, we're using a lot of LLMs for development. So.
Interesting. Mike, we'll go
Yes.
to you next. So now we're inside, your company where you're developing these new syntians, I think
Yes.
as you call them, and I had to ask you to explain it for a
Sure.
lay person, so maybe you'll do that for the audience as well.
Sure.
What does AI do there?
Yeah. So many of you may already know that all the proteins in your body are built out of one-handed amino acid, left-handed amino acid. So biochemistry 101 for those of you that took that coursework. However, at the same time, their mirror image versions of those amino acids have been on the planet for 4 billion years. They're in your body right now. One of them is an important neurotransmitter. And what the healthcare industry learned back when solid phase synthesis of peptide and protein sequences became possible with chemistry was that you could use these mirror image molecules to kind of install them into existing peptides and give them resistance to the body's ability to kind of degrade them. So massive boost in stability through that. And the first drug was in 1978 where this was installed, and it was something that the chemists figured out right away. And that's because your body is all built around interacting with proteins that are all left-handed amino acids. So when you start using right-handed amino acids in your biologics, it's like trying to get your left hand into a right-handed glove. It doesn't work anymore. If I gave you an antibody medicine and injected you with it, and it was the mirror image version, it wouldn't bind to the target, it wouldn't have a long half-life, your body would just let it float around for a while, and then it would eventually clear it. So these proteins that we build, these synteins, are incredibly, incredibly stable because we build them entirely out of mirror image amino acids. So they look like proteins, but they're, at the chemical level, a mirror image. And so we can do things like put them in stomach gastric fluid for a week, and they don't degrade at all. They're perfectly stable to it. So we're taking it kind of to an extreme of what the pharmaceutical industry already realized was something that could really augment the products that they make. Now, this has been discovered empirically over the last few decades. People would figure out through chemistry how to install one or two. The idea of what you could do if you could create full D-amino acid biologics has been around for a while. And what we saw with generative AI impacting protein design, and Flagship created another company called Generate Biomedicines, which leverages it for things like antibodies and enzymes built out of traditional amino acids. But what we started thinking about was how could this be used to open up another place without having to necessarily go back and reinvent the tools. And so thinking about taking the tools like AlphaFold, diffusion, I think some of these were discussed this afternoon, and figuring out how to apply them to be able to open up this mirror image universe of proteins that doesn't exist. We don't have data on it. There's 10 in the entire structural database that was used to create these other algorithms. That was kind of the initial, like, wow, that would be crazy, and it could completely enable us to create molecules that have never existed, but the tools themselves, maybe we could trick them in a way and hack them in a way to be able to create these de novo, and now we could kind of conjure them out of thin air, which would allow us to create medicines that are, antibodies that you could take orally, could get deep into tumors, which are harsh environments, and could circumvent some of the even immune responses that happen with a lot of drugs. So it just seemed like kind of a real paradigm shifting opportunity to bring forth a modality that you're taking all of what's great around biologics, but now you're moving it into a completely different chemical space. And yeah, that's what we've been building over the last few years at Abiologics, and it's been really exciting to see how that process works, as well as very hard.
Do these tools work as you're hacking them, or you're finding
Yeah. So we were the first to design de novo an all D-amino acid protein that could interact with a target. But it took a lot of working with the tools and understanding how to kind of hack them and understanding how to test them. I think a real key piece for us was once the tools started demonstrating themselves as being so effective in the L world, we knew what good looked like, and we knew what, for example, a great target looked like. And so we could kind of cut through a lot of what had been learned to get those first algorithms set up, and we could just jump straight to it and work on targets that worked, and we could work with the best tools that seemed to have the most fidelity with translating into the lab, which was able to get us to bring, biology. What's beautiful about it in biotech is you can make billions and billions of antibodies. You can be kind of right, like in the neighborhood, and find something useful. But if we're building these all D amino acid proteins, biology can't make them. We can't trick a cell to be able to produce it. You have to build it chemically. And the throughput at protein size is tremendously small compared to that, hundreds at a time. So it really had to be, meet those performance metrics. And that was what we could see in the existing tools, is that it was maybe for the first time possible.
Interesting. Derrick, you had the not small task of deploying AI in an existing company that had its ways of working. Tell us a little bit about what you did on the operation side.
Yeah, so if you think about BMS, traditional pharma company, has existed since 1889. I may be getting that right, wrong, and has grown through acquisitions. Typically, you have molecules that are coming in from startups, and you have it coming in from your R&D organization. You're developing them, and you grow through acquisition. You add sites, manufacturing sites to your portfolio, and so you've got kind of a very traditional brick and mortar type of operation, although very advanced because you're doing things like growing cells to make antibodies to fight cancer. Now, with that, we set a task of what it's actually now it's public, but it's one of our Massachusetts sites, to say, okay, we need to be able to make more of our drug substance, our product, the first stage of our product. We need to make more of it, but we don't want to add any physical infrastructure to the site. So how do we make more of it? And ultimately, this was a kind of a standard run-of-the-mill business question, something that you see in your operations classes, which is, okay, how do I add capacity? Well, am I utilizing my capacity to its fullest? Am I doing changeovers properly? What's my downtime like, et cetera? And so we approached it looking at how do we do this and transform it digitally. So we're not going to add any physical infrastructure in the sense of we're not adding another tank to grow cells. We need to just grow cells more efficiently. So one of the specific pieces, so we've used kind of traditional AI in the sense of machine learning models, and you're using techniques like random forests and neural networks and the traditional stuff on one side, and then I'll talk about the Gen AI on the other. So the traditional piece, so our problem was we have a process, and it's a standard process that we've filed with the FDA and with other regulatory bodies to essentially grow these cells. These cells are producing antibodies, and we need to grow them in different reactors over the course of time. To grow them, they're kind of finicky. Now, we know a lot about them, and the science has been around and has been pretty mature, probably over the last 15 years, but it's been around longer than that. And so we know a lot about our product. The problem is we still have variability in terms of how many kilograms of material we get out of this 20,000 liter reactor. And so really it was a problem set that was ripe for just a traditional data science approach, which is how do I get more out of a bunch of, using a bunch of input data? How do I train it on a bunch of input data? And so what we were able to find was we had some specific constraints that we had to stay in so that we could stay in spec. And we were able to grow, to improve the what we call KGAs or kilogram actives significantly and have reduced the variability of that process. And by significantly, I mean we're getting a third more output than we initially had, this is tens of millions of dollars in value for us. It saves us from having to expand to another plant. It ensures that we can produce reliably, and we're not going to risk losing a batch, which would be, it's like I said, it's millions of dollars if you lose a batch. So just using those traditional AI ML techniques, we were able to fundamentally better utilize our existing capacity infrastructure. Now, on the other hand, too, there's other activities that we were doing to improve our operations at the site, and those were things like using Gen AI to do deviation investigation. So deviations can be something essentially went out, didn't happen the way you thought it would. And so in pharma, you got to log all of that. You got to track all that. Some are very serious and some are minor. So, but you have a body of data that's natural free text that's great for an LLM that you can search. You also need to write reports, and you need to do it in a standard way. So we've deployed in our AI storefront or our Gen AI storefront, a deviation writing assistant, which right now we're just using it for very low case deviations, but the intent is to grow it and to make it so that it's validated or GMP compliant and utilized in the future. Those things are that plus some standard operational excellence capabilities have really transformed the site. The one piece that I wanted to just kind of branch out into, and it was something that it was talked about a little bit this afternoon, which is the human element to this. This didn't happen overnight. This was a lot of effort last year, and fundamentally we had to win some hearts and minds. So we work with a lot of really smart people who are engineers and scientists, and they're well trained and they know their space. They didn't buy into it up front. They're like, I know how to do we're doing standard linear regression. We know everything we need to know about this molecule. We've been making it for 15 years or 20 years. But what we were able to prove is like, okay, but your linear regression is not looking at the nonlinear effects, the interactions between different parts of your process, and we're giving you another tool in your toolbox. And once we started getting people, we worked through the hearts and minds, showing them what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, taking them through the process, and you had people that were just sparking and loving it. You had early adopters that were helping us gain traction, but you had people that were sparking and loving it. And fundamentally, when we went to go live to put in the theory into practice with a real batch, which could have been risky in the sense of, we generally knew what would happen, but you might not know, like something unintended may happen. They were ready to not just test one of the parameter changes, they were ready to test multiple parameter changes. So that change management aspect and winning the hearts and minds was critical to the success. So the human element, regardless of the tools or the capabilities, has to be at the forefront. Anyway, sorry, my long rambly story.
It's very interesting. We're actually just joking that this is not just machine learning, it's human learning. How do you get humans to learn how to work with the machine? One thing that I love that you have in common, and again, I say this is beyond the hype, because we hear a lot about, AI works, the technology works. What doesn't quite work is how to figure out how to be a hybrid workforce and how to lay out a process or a workflow and say, these are pieces that I'm going to go after, but still have the human in the loop. So this is what you all three have in common at different parts of the process, but I think that's really interesting. Let's stay on now the how, the human aspect, because as I said, I left the field because I couldn't see a path to radiologists adopting AI, and Julie told me it's finally happening. So how did it happen? Tell me, and maybe we'll focus a little bit on the economic incentive, because I know that's big, right?
That's big, and that's not solved yet.
Yes.
But I think early computer-aided detection just had such a high false positive rate that radiologists were just frustrated by it. They're like, yeah, this is not helpful. I'm just turning it off because it's more distracting than helpful. So part of it is just getting better, but you also then have to jump over that hurdle where they're just like, well, this is just another CAD. How do I know this will help me? So one thing, you talked about winning hearts and minds. Having a skeptic as a key opinion leader is useful. When you get somebody who's like, I have 30 years of experience, this isn't going to help me get better. And you say, okay, well, then you're exactly the person whose feedback we need, right? Because you are the ground truth. You are the expert. And that was tremendously helpful. One of our early, within RadNet, early skeptics is now our biggest adopter. She said, I hate it when I have to read a case without the tool now, because she said, it makes me a better, more attentive radiologist, but she says it helps my team get to my level. And that's been what's really crucial when you can see that it's giving the best radiologist to every patient. I think that's where people really start to catch on. There's also the idea of it, this is not a replacement, this is a second pair of eyes. You know, the idea of an adjudicated read has been part of clinical practice for a long time. It's sort of the gold standard, common in Europe, not so common in the US, where you actually have 2 readers of every scan, and then when they differ, it goes to an adjudicator, who's the third reader. Essentially, we're introducing that with the AI as that second reader. So you can say, all right, the human didn't think this was suspicious, but the AI did. We're going to send that to a third, an expert reader who will review that case and say, oh, yeah, the AI was false positive, or, oh, no, actually, that's something we should recall and look into. And that process, you asked about reimbursement. Insurance won't pay for it yet, but we're having patients pay, self-pay within RadNet and say, that's worth an extra $40 to me. Maybe it's because they have a family history, or for whatever, they have reason to be more suspicious. Or maybe it's just they're saying, actually, I like the idea of having two reads and having that extra safeguard review. And through that opt-in process, we've caught 500 more biopsy-proven cancers a year, which is huge. This is on the breast cancer side, so that's a broad screening program. And we're hoping that that will lead to insurance companies recognizing, oh, that's probably worth paying for. And that may increase adoption, because it's still only about a third of radiologists are actively using these AI systems.
I know this is a biased audience, but who here would want to have AI check on top of their doctor looking at the screen? It's kind of like getting into an Uber and they don't use a map. You're like, what if there's a traffic jam today? You need to know about this. Mike, let's talk a little bit about adoption on your end. Was it easier because you guys kind of started with that thesis, or did you also still,
Yeah, it was always part of the thesis. I think for us, in terms of like the capital efficiency, it was, we already know these are useful to deploy in drugs. They've been done empirically and serendipitously, and only with that, it's even only an option within a subset of modalities that exist anyways, and it takes years if you're lucky, right? And so what this enabled was, instead of just some substitutions, full re-engineering to have all of those amazing properties at the beginning. And if within a few cycles of our kind of closed loop, we end up with traction on one of these leads, we're able to bring it down to months that you have these products now. So it just was, we could literally look at, hey, these are the drugs that are using this already. These are the amazing properties. And we're potentially opening it up to all these other modalities and shortening the time to be able to discover them to months, basically now, weeks to months. And so the economics argument was absolutely there. And then I think also now there's additional pressure in terms of the availability of funding for biotech companies. We're being asked to deliver things way further along than we used to, and there's less money available. And so I think the efficiency that you're able to get products to look like they're ready to essentially go into humans, we call it development candidate kind of stage, at only a few years into a company is really, really important. And these molecules have baked in properties that you would typically optimize, protease stability, immunogenicity, and things like that. Sometimes they can be kind of a black box too, from a discovery perspective. And so it was kind of fortunate how everything kind of lined up for us, and I feel very grateful to be working on this technology, especially given the availability of funds now, because I think it is really well aligned with what people are looking for. And in general, I would say for biotech companies, it's not, it's kind of not an option anymore. You're not able to have the same, we're not able to have the same number of hands in the lab as we used to, not the same number of computational people analyzing data sets. So, I think everybody is really being forced to adopt these coworkers we were talking about earlier within the lab. And I see it translate into literal headcount. I see implementation of technologies being done so much quicker by the team, analysis being done by one person that would have typically taken, 2 or 3. It's really pretty incredible.
Derrick, what about for a big company, how do you make the case to get budget to deploy AI? What was the thinking there in terms of ROI?
Yeah, well, there's no shortage of great ideas. Every day there's like, I get emails that are like, hey, we could use an LLM to do this, or we could do this. And it's like, great, okay, so, but fundamentally for a company, it's like, for us, it's how does this impact patients? How does this help us get the medicine to patients faster? How does it either improve, our quality? And then finally, how does it improve safety for our employees or the people working in the manufacturing facilities? And then finally, like, how does it improve the financials? So getting people to be able to articulate that, but not just articulate it, commit to it. That's the piece. The leap is like put it in your P&L or put it in as a metric that we can monitor after to say, hey, we did something. I'm okay experimenting. We can try new things, but let's flag it as that. But we can't just be trying a million new things. We need to do things that are actually going to be transformative to the company to impact, again, patients, employees, or and the financials. So that's been the challenge, is getting people to think with that mindset and to make that commitment. I think the other reflection is nobody goes into work saying, hey, I want to do things the same, well, most people don't. I want to do things the same way that I've always been doing it, and I know like we have fewer people to do it, like I just want to do the same job, like, and I just don't ever want to change. And nobody comes into work that way. People want to try new things. They want to change. Generally, they're just, either the incentive isn't there, so they're carrots and the sticks, right? Like you got to use both. They might not be aligned. It might not be, you probably, in many cases, the user experience is horrible. We finally seen with LLMs a user experience just from the nature of it that is natural to our human activities. But like you look at things like, I use the SAP GUI, not their web version, but their application. If you use SAP, the GUI, and sorry if there's anybody from SAP, the GUI is horrible. It's like, it is so bad, but it's built off of like an architecture that worked in the 80s. But we need to design these capabilities with the end user in mind. That's fundamentally the bridge that we haven't done. So how scientists think, how scientists operate, how people think in the lab, how the manufacturers think. I've seen PID diagrams that are just like, and that's what we put as our HMI, or our human machine interface, like the interface the operators use. That's embarrassing what we put out there and then expect them to find things. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
I always thought, good AI is good design thinking, first and foremost.
It has to be. And good business value.
Yes. Maybe we'll end, and then if the audience has questions, I'm curious to hear your take. It was a quote earlier about shifting from AI as a tool to AI as a teammate or a co-pilot. Are you, if you take a step back, are you seeing that now in your enterprise? And are we at a point where we are actually going to have multiple AIs help us at different points based on what you see? We'll start with you, Julie, and the radiologists.
Well, so the radiologists, as I said, the idea of a second reader really resonates. And the idea of, okay, there's a second pair of eyes helping on this, I think definitely resonates. And then internally, software engineers are embracing AI as a co-pilot easily, and we're finding it especially helpful. It's not a replacement, and that is obvious if you've ever tried to run the code that AI generates. You need A, to be able to really precisely explain what you're trying to accomplish, and B, to be able to recognize and debug the output. So we're definitely seeing that way of thinking about this as a companion.
Yeah, I mean, at Flagship, there's a company that was recently launched called Lila, which is essentially kind of starting with this idea of closed-loop agentic scientist, which is really cool, and then it's great for the rest of us at the enterprise to be able to see how that emerges. What are the use cases where they get traction? A lot of it obviously is tied into automation and reproducibility and stuff like that. So I get exposure from that. At Abiologics, we've been building these molecules from the discovery stage even before things were really working, we were building a database and collecting all the data in a highly structured way the whole time. We've been able to use that for some kind of, to identify binary failures and simple things, but over time, I would 100% expect us to bring an agent in, Marty, talking to folks about what that could look like, to be able to at least experiment with it first, right? The scientists, of course, some of them are excited, some of them want to understand a little bit more what it could look like, but at the end of the day, I think we'll start with experimenting and piloting, and I'm really excited. And I feel like the one thing that I've learned as I've been more and more exposed over the last several years is these tools are going to continue to evolve so fast. So while they may not be here today, the likelihood that they will within the lifetime of this company is very, very high to me. And so we want to be ready for that.
You mean there's a difference between engineers and scientists?
Yes, sure.
I'm aging myself, but if you're a Big Bang Theory fan, that's from there. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm excited about, so yeah, agentic is the hype cycle word of the day, and it's just like all of a sudden since November, it's become the biggest thing. And I can't go into a conversation without someone saying agentic. You can play bingo on it. But I am excited about it because you have the ability to define specific roles and either augment and in some case automate. By the way, in the supply chain world, there's stuff that humans are doing that they introduce variability and error in that we shouldn't have them doing anymore. Demand planning and forecasting for an established product, humans should not be doing that. They usually make it wrong. So there's things that you want automation and agents to be able to do, and then there's other things that you want as augmentation. Fundamentally, we want people to be able to do things that are value-added tasks, right? That's not the stuff that's, that you can automate or repeat. You can use their brains to do much more creative things. That's a much more effective use of their time and their capabilities. It's getting people to bridge that gap. And I think agentic, because of the natural, I guess it depends on what you mean by it, because it can mean 15 things to 1,000 people. But if you define it as, following with the user experience of LLMs, et cetera, like there's a lot of possibility to gain rapid adoption. Again, but the backbone to it is still data. I love that your data is structured. That is a luxury that many of us don't have.
We're 20 people, so
but still, like you're setting the right foundation. Like data is the problem, and data is just as valuable as the application. We just don't treat it that way. Anyway, sorry.
Any questions from the audience? Go for it.
Or lung cancer, from 3.5 and now you get to 2.5 stage. For that kind of procedure, do you need to get FDA approval before you roll out into a diagnosis? And also, what other module that is kind of very effective beyond lung cancer? So that's one question. I actually have a question regarding the protein you are talking about, the right-hand protein. So in terms of identify, how big a pool of a right-hand protein you constructed, and do you using a large language model to help you to build those protein pool? The other question for Derrick is in terms of what do you think about the small, because for pharmaceutical company, it's very important in terms of keeping the data confidential. And how do you see the application of small language model, locally deployed? And do your company start to use that kind of technology? So those are a couple of different questions. Thank you.
Should we go in reverse order?
We'll start with you.
Okay. So the short answer is yes, we need FDA approval, and we're actually in the process of getting it. We have CE mark for our lung cancer product. So it's deployed in Europe and a number of countries, and the UK most broadly. I'm not sure I caught the second part of the question was about, can you apply the same model to other forms of cancer? Was that what you were asking?
Well, what I'm asking is, I suppose we mentioned lung cancer likely is the most effective so far.
Yes.
You beyond that, what other module, like what other disease
Ah.
that in your like perspective is most effective?
Yeah, so where are the next most?
Yeah.
Obviously, we started with the ones where they're the broadest scale screening. One of the things we're pushing on right now that we had done some work on, had to pause it for a while because there wasn't as much traction, is the neurodegenerative disease. So the MRIs segmenting the various brain areas and looking for something called white matter hyperintensity that is a marker for Alzheimer's disease. There wasn't enough traction to, well, yeah, okay, it's nice to track it, but if you can't do anything about it, there's not a lot of value to it. But now that there are these new Alzheimer treatment drugs, tracing, is the drug being effective? Can you find microbleeds with this sort of AI-aided reads of the MRIs? I think that's the next area that we're really excited about and investing in and making some good progress on.
And I think I understand the question, but so in terms of the models that we're using to be able to generate these mirror image proteins, so we had to build our own pipeline of tools completely from scratch because none of them will work out of the box to be able to do what we're trying to get them to do. And we actually, as we were kind of reconstructing, we found a lot of things a lot of issues and bugs within what was being created that we think we're the only ones using things in a certain way, and we're probably the only ones that know about these weird little idiosyncratic like issues within it, which was a huge learning for me as somebody that doesn't do a whole lot of software engineering. But we had to build our own pipeline. It constantly evolves because another thing about the protein design space that I believe is that the tools will continue to evolve. And so, what we're able to do within like the latest generations, whether it's from imagining the protein from the beginning, optimizing the protein and sequence, the interface, scoring everything, like we're constantly swapping bits and pieces in and out to be able to optimize it. And we're collecting about 300 data points every single week, and so it's just been super iterative. So it's not even, it has not stabilized yet, and I wouldn't anticipate it stabilizing.
And I think for the question regarding like using smaller language models, I'm going to pivot it slightly in the sense of all of our models are deployed within our own cloud infrastructure. So we have everything from a cloud-based Amazon AWS infrastructure or Azure infrastructure, but it doesn't leave the four walls. And so it's important because there's IP, there's regulated information. There are use cases where we do have personally identifiable information, more so on the commercial or the R&D side of things. So the data security has been critical. So those model instances, we license them. We've got Gemini, we've got ChatGPT, we've got DeepSeek, we've got them all, and our IT organization has been very progressive actually in deploying capabilities. We have our own GenAI storefront, and it's pretty awesome what we have access to internally. The challenge still is how do you make sure you have people who are literate in the capabilities and can do prompt engineering, can build things. That's a challenge that we need to seek, although prompt engineering may be dead if you saw some of the headlines today. And also not relying on it as a crutch. So you need to build the people capabilities to be able to consume that, of which we have been deploying. Yeah, the human learning.
By the way, it's agent tuners. That's the new prompt engineer. I predict that's going to be the job description that's going to spike on LinkedIn soon. All right, well, I think I somewhat got us back on time, but we'll hand it back over to you, Bruce. Thanks, everyone, and on behalf of patients, thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.